And happy New Year to everybody. And thanks for joining this call. What I'm going to do is probably I'm just going to walk you through some of the LIG activities and some of the plans that we are planning to do in the new year. Would definitely want your feedback on that. So let me just share my screen if you can. Let's see. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I can see.
Give me a minute. So I think today we will. I'll just give an update on the LIG activities, and then Ivan and George will walk you through the process maturity webinar that we have planned today. I think most of you know, so I will skip this slide. I just want to start talking about this LIG activity that we are planning to do this year. Two new things that we are planning to do is the member talk video series. We did it a couple of them last year, but now this year we would want to actually go out and talk to members. So if any of you are interested in being part of that interview, we would love to have talk to you about your favorite topic and put it on the YouTube channel and the LinkedIn channel so other people can also know more about you. This is a very good branding exercise for everybody and also showcasing your experience to the larger audience. But the other key thing that we are looking at is doing a weekly conference group chat. This will be our ongoing group chat every Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m. Online, and we can talk about some of the topics. And this leads me to the next slide, just to capture the feedback that we have received in the last innovation mixer. So I've captured some of that and we'll be circulating a slide to everybody. So the idea is that we'll pick up topics from here on a weekly basis and probably create a theme for a month and just have talks or discussion on that theme for a month. So we can call it, for example, business service catalog, the service catalog as a theme for a month, and we will have discussions around that. So that's the idea. We are open about any feedback regarding that. So this is what we captured last in December, and we're going to kind of go through that and come out with some key topics and share it with you or with all of you. I think these are some of those our social media presence. So love if you can follow us on LinkedIn, join the LinkedIn group, come on follow on Twitter, and subscribe to YouTube channel. And with that, I think my time is up. I'll probably share it with stop sharing and give the floor to Ivan and George.
Yeah, thank you. So let me introduce myself first, and then I will ask the same from my friend George. I'm Ivan Erdos. I'm working for the Kaiser Permanente. I'm a process consultant, internal consultant. I'm consulting my internal partners about process. Also, I have a role of a process architect and responsible for a lot of process tools. And this is really important in our process improvement journey to establish our own tool set and trying to organize a little bit ourselves around process. We have started from ITIL like everybody, but ITIL is not enough. We have realized, and ITIL is just a framework which you have to fill with your own methods and tools and reflect your environment. So we worked a lot around ITIL, and we are showing progress, and I'm really happy about that. And I hope you will find interesting what we will talk about. I have a long background in IT. I was everything in IT, what you can imagine. Now in this period, I'm trying to give back to our IT people, trying to use my long expertise and experiences. What about you, George? Can you introduce yourself?
It's very hard to match that impressive resume, Ivan, but I'll try. So I also work at Kaiser Permanente, and I'm in the same group as Ivan. And my focus, we like to think of ourselves in some ways we're like internal process consultants. So think of us as almost like an internal consulting team. So of course, we've been making progress trying to get that process culture throughout the organization, because you know, the IT division is about 10,000 people, and KP as a whole is about 200,000 people. So it's a very large and complex organization with many layers. So in order to be effective and eventually begin to change to a process culture, it definitely has to be, like Ivan was saying, those hard skills, you know, using ITIL, then using it for the way that works best for us and other methodologies. But also, equally importantly, is the soft skills. So we have to have a blend of the hard and the soft skills to make progress. But we are making progress, and I think we'll have an interesting discussion today around the process maturity, which is one of our central pieces of work.
Yeah, great. So let me start with a little history about our process maturity assessment journey, and some words about the tool we are using today, not much, because this is not really our topic for today. Our topic for today is more about everything what we can do with process maturity, because maturity assessment is one thing, but how to use the results, that's a more important thing, I think. So we have started some maturity assessment trials about 5-6 years ago, when we wanted to measure ourselves against our process requirements, how the different processes score on a scale when we are talking about maturity. Maturity is a complicated thing. There are different views of maturity, and there are different tools out there like COBIT and CMMI. Some of you probably familiar with those tools. When we had a look to those tools, we have found all those tools are specific to some processes, because they are trying to assess the process readiness and the process performance as well. We were looking more for a tool which was universal, and we can get comparable results for the different processes. So finally we have developed something using all the experiences with the existing tools, but what we have developed finally, it was an organizational maturity assessment tool. What does it mean, organizational maturity? It means everything which is readiness to execute the process, but nothing really about the process itself. In this way, the processes are comparable. So what does it mean? What is readiness? Readiness is to have the documentation. Readiness is to have the right governance in place, to train the people, to adopt the process, and also a lot of things about maturity, about performance measurements, and how we run the process day by day. So our tool, it has 5 levels as traditional, and it is looking to the processes in 6 different dimensions, and we are measure the process against those dimensions, identify where they are on that scale, and in that way we can use them to compare on a dashboard if required. And also the tool gives some gaps for us where we didn't meet with the requirements, and we can use it as a basis for further process improvement work. So George, I know, because I was part of it too, you worked with a team of people from different organizations in Kaiser, not only IT, but also from shared services. to develop a new version of this maturity assessment. Can you tell me something about that work, how it went, and what was the biggest issue you have to deal with?
Yes, sure. So I think the first point, and I think just to get the foundation right, is when we talk about process maturity, it is a very broad topic. And so it does take, we've got to all be grounded on what it is. So I think just to ground on that, what I tell people when we go on this journey is, kind of as Ivan was saying, the process maturity is a structured way to assess your current process and establish your future targets. And the assessment does come by having those dimensions that Ivan referenced, things like documentation, governance, implementation. And ultimately, you have the assessment questions and that 1 to 5 rating scale, which I think the lowest is owned and performed, and 5 is up to optimizing. So, when we met as a team, the very first thing we had to agree was, do we agree on the foundation of what we're talking about here before we even get into any specifics or details? So we had to sort of make sure that big things for us in IT that we assumed were a given, we had to make sure that the team agreed with. Do you agree with these dimensions? Do you agree with these levels? So I think the first learning point there was don't make any assumptions. Make sure you spell everything out as clearly as possible and get some, what I call big block buy-in on some of those major concepts. And make sure that everyone realizes that what they're working on here is not a quick fix. To move between maturity levels is often a multi-year journey, because I've worked on some processes that have taken 3 or 4 years to get to their target state. So you have to sort of have, if you like, those big rocks or those big major principles all laid out and agreed before the team gets into any level of detail. So right. That, I think, Ivan, would be my initial guidance or thought.
Mm-hmm. Did you have issues with the language? Because we in IT, we tend to use some language. It is the language of ITIL or COBIT, but how the non-IT people reacted to those language issues?
Right. So I think it's funny because for us in IT, we think we're speaking clearly. Like when we say something and we use a few acronyms and we say it in our own way, perhaps it's got an ITIL orientation to it. But when you're working with other team members who may be a step or two removed from systems, you realize they don't understand what you're talking about. And so I think some of the terminology had to be simplified and clarified as we work through this. And we shouldn't assume a level of technical competence as high as perhaps we assumed it was. I think, Ivan, you and I recall working with a few folks on the team who were struggling how to use the basic features of a computer.
Yeah, exactly.
They were questioning us about edit and paste. So I think clarification of terminology and that kind of thing is critical. And obviously they're key learnings for things that you might want to do differently once you've gone through it.
Yeah. I recall when we were talking about process tools, first, nobody understands what we are talking about, because in the mindset of an IT guy, tool means a software, a solution, but in their mind, the tool was more a piece of paper, an Excel spreadsheet, a checklist, right? So
that's right.
That's another case where terminology is different, and we should get to the same page first with everybody, and being crisp clear with the terms to continue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that another learning was during this journey, and even after that, we faced with that day by day, that to measure a process, there are two basic ways to do that, or two basic approaches. One is maturity. Maturity is about how are you prepared to execute the process. Did you document your process? It is designed according to the needs. Do you have some accountable people in place? Do you have training? Did you train your people? Is it adopted everywhere, or there are people who are not following the process, and so on? This is organizational maturity. But it's another question how the process is delivering, right? What is the effectiveness of the process? It is possible we have everything there well documented, everybody is doing what is expected, but our, let's say with incident management, our outages are a couple of days long and we are not able to resolve that, right? It is two separate things, and everybody should understand that there is one part of the process to be ready, and there is another part of the process to start to execute, measure, find the right measurements, you're measuring your effectiveness and trying to optimize or improve your numbers. So that's another important learning. It is not obvious for everybody. It is not enough just to document and train and you are fine.
And you know what, Aidan, I was just thinking that, before we get into any other level of detail, probably a fairly common question for everyone would ask is, having gone through this, what would I do differently from this engagement? And my answer to that would be, if you're going to go on this journey, that one of the first things you got to make sure you have is executive buy-in very early on, because what you don't want to have happen is spend all this time working on something, and then you get to the end of the journey, and some of your stakeholders who you think are going to use this simply say, well, we're not ready for that yet.
Yep.
So that happened to us, and then I was wondering why. Another thing that's tied to that is, and I know it can be painful, but do regular status reporting to your executive sponsors, because that's a mechanism to keep your communication, and then do as much marketing and awareness to these stakeholders. Go to meetings, go to workshops, go to summits. So sort of set yourself up for success with excellent communication. And if there is a roadblock because someone's not buying in, find out earlier, not later. So I just thought that was worth adding, because that the earlier part of your conversation was sort of heading in that direction.
Yeah, it leads me to another question. You were one of the first ones who started to use the new tool. What was your experience? How the different people could use the tool and understand how to use and evaluate the results?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I was sort of in the forest. So I'd been working for quite a few months on what should this new assessment look like. I'd become very comfortable with it. Every word had been picked apart and discussed and aligned. So I then get to the point where we're ready to start using it. And one of the first observations I had was most of the folks were completely overwhelmed by it. To them it felt a little bit like, what? There's how many dimensions and how many questions within these dimensions? So they felt a little bit overwhelmed. The second thing that they quickly came to realize, tied to that point, was they're not going to be able to, unless they too were familiar with it, they're going to need consulting support. So they realize that they're not going to be able to do this on their own, and obviously, in our case, so we're going to rely on the process consultants. But on the positive side, so those, if you like, was somewhat perhaps negative-ish. On the positive side, I think to one of your earlier points, people quickly grasp how this will nicely align with their annual goal planning. because of course the KMMI quantifies a score and a target, and you can see your achievement. So I think a lot of folks who've been struggling writing their goals and what should we do and so on quickly grasp that leveraging the KMMI framework was a very nice way to tie into their goal planning and activities. So that I think those three things I think were the first observations from people.
Mm-hmm. How hard was to get the answers in a trustable way? So collecting evidences and being sure the answer is really right and not just made up.
Right. So this is probably one of the trickiest parts, because we create the framework and then we engage with the various processes. And of course, we're engaging with people who live and breathe this stuff every day, and they're the experts in what they do. So, of course, you know, I think to engage with people, I did rely to some extent and trust them that if they pointed to a source and they knew more about it, they were the ones that were ultimately going to say, yes, this in our world would satisfy this requirement. But I think the trust, so there's the trust in terms of the content of what they're doing, and is the information you're providing as evidence is trustworthy. But there's also this trust, I think, that comes with the team. In other words, when we were doing this, largely it was people volunteering to come together. So I think that's where the goal alignment has to happen, that if we align our work to goals, then the orgs are all pointing in the right direction and people will work together. They'll obviously get to know each other over time and trust each other as we do quality work. But I think this is probably one of the hardest areas, and I'm sure many organizations struggle with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting part of this engagement. What people can do with the results, right? You mentioned it is really helpful in the goal setting,
right?
But
that's right.
But also it is a really good question how it helps in
Mm-hmm.
process management, in process ownership,
Mm-hmm.
because it is
right.
expected from the process owner to set the targets, right? What
right.
they want to achieve, and the target should be really achievable. And that means it should be well-based, sorted from the gaps. Where are the
Mm-hmm.
gaps in my existing process? What documentation piece is missing? Who are the practitioners who were not trained? How can I generate a new training material and deploy the training? How can I measure adoption? That's one of the big questions, right?
Yeah. So in a simple way, you know, we get to the point where we complete a KMMI assessment. We see which assessment questions have been met, which ones have not been met, what's the journey to get to target. But I look at, if you've done an assessment, I kind of think of it very simply like an accelerator pedal, because I can guarantee this: if you complete an assessment and then stop focusing on the work that got you to that point, your process maturity will retard and go back. So one of the most important things when you've completed an assessment is to ask the process owner and the folks in the organization, we need to make sure that we've got the people in place and the processes to maintain the current score. So even beyond future ambitions, make sure that things are there to maintain the current score. And then once you're comfortable that those processes and the maintenance is in place, you're positioned to say, well, where do we go from here? And this is where I think people tend to get a little bit too fixated by looking at the numbers first. What I try and encourage people to say is, okay, you're at this point. Let's look at your process. Let's look at the various dimensions that you have not met yet at the next level. And which of these dimensions adds the most value to your process? And then let's perhaps start working on those. So it may mean that your target isn't actually necessarily to get to the next whole level. If you're a 2, it may not be to get to a 3. It may be to get to a 2.5 by increasing 2 or 3 dimensions that will add the most value.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I sort of encourage people to begin to think, especially as the process is getting more mature, your next steps could be along the lines of which dimensions should spike in maturity to serve you best, rather than trying to improve everything, because you might have A, a big work effort, and B, diminishing returns.
Yeah, that's a very important thing, what you mentioned about maintaining the existing score, and my learning that at the lower levels it is relatively easy to maintain the score, because once you have documented your process and there are no big changes, it is still documented next year, right? So you may review the documentation, but it is not a big deal. However, when somebody reached the level 3, which is standardized, that means only one process in the whole corporation, right? There are no variations. Everybody is following the same process. Everybody is using the same tool. Everybody is using the same training material, and it is very easy to let it slow down and slip on the side, and new variations are coming in, and you are again at level 2, and you can start again your journey. So also in level 4, even more complicated, because level 4 is about control, about measuring and reacting, and that's a continuous thing. So if you stop that, you are bumped down by 1 level. So that's also really important in maintaining your process achievements. And by the way, that's an important thing. When we are comparing these things, we want to compare the different processes. That's a good opportunity for a process dashboard. You were part of adding the maturity part to the CIO dashboard in KPI. So can you tell me something about your experiences around that?
Yeah. So this goes back to the point we were talking about earlier about the visibility of this work being critical. So we decided that we wanted to use some of the real estate on the CIO dashboard to show our process maturity and where we are. So it turns out that, depending on your organization, you really have to think about this, because you've got precious real estate on the dashboard, and you know that folks are only going to glance at it for a few seconds. So you need to get your message out very quickly and succinctly. Right. So I think the first underpinning point is fundamentally not all processes are created equally, and some are going to be more important than others. So when you're thinking about your processes for the reporting, say on an annual basis to the CIO dashboard, which processes are, if you like, in quotation marks, your priority processes? Which are the ones that if you have 30 to 50 processes articulated, what are the top few? And I wouldn't necessarily put a number on it, but let's just say the top, 5 to 10 that are really of most interest. So those are the ones you should focus on for your real estate. And then once you start providing this information, it's really a case of, okay, they're going to sort of begin to make decisions based on it. So the way I see it is, you're giving this to the CIO, and then you can expect the CIO to start asking questions about it, and maybe even setting directives that once they see it. And so then you'll have to be ready to react to that. So I think that's what you should expect. An example might be, Ivan, perhaps the CIO might look at it and not be a process expert at all, but he might just say, for example, I don't think any process, be that a priority process or perhaps some expanded set, should be less than a 1.0 in maturity.
Yeah.
Okay, that's directive. You've been given a floor limit. But I think that's what you should expect, is once you start providing this information, that you're going to get this visibility, and then you're going to start getting questions about it, and maybe even directives from the top about what they think you should do. And then you have to react. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah. George, if I made you just for this evening the CIO of Kaiser Permanente IT, without the package, of course, just
I'll take the package.
Just the responsibility. So what would you say as a CIO? What would you expect from your organization or the individual processes or specific processes, where they should be on the maturity journey in an ideal state, let's say a couple of years from now?
Right. So what I would say if I were the CIO is really twofold. What I would say is, and I guess I was in my prior answer, no process should be less than a 1.0 within, let's say a 12-month period. So there's a certain level of process competency that I would expect. And if you look at the questions at 1.0, it's very foundational. And I think when, for example, Kaiser Permanente is in the healthcare business, you can understand why this is so important. So on the one hand, I would say I wouldn't want any process to be less than a 1.0 or not to have a plan to get there within 12 months. Yeah. But on the other hand, having looked at the 5-point scale, I've tended to find the sweet spot is right there at a 3.0. So I would say, that's what we call standardized. So what I would say is that we should, as an executive or leadership team, tell you which processes are most important to us that need to be at a 3.0 over an X month period. And then between those two things happening, I think I'd be satisfied.
Yeah, and probably those processes are the most critical ones for delivery, like incident, problem, change. Change also plays a big role in compliance, right? And compliance management itself, IT security at a healthcare company should be a very, very high level on the top of the list, definitely.
Yeah, and this is actually really interesting because it's highly debatable. And, I used to think exactly like you were saying, Ivan, but then sometimes I question myself. We have a process around the people, human resources. So on the other hand, we say, people are a critical thing and they're important. So that would make a case for those processes needing to mature. So I think what you have to do is, just like you look at the dimensions that make the most sense for your process to spike in maturity, you need to have that discussion with your executive team for the nature of the business that you're in. What are the priority processes? If you're in a payment transaction business and a healthcare business, are they the same? Are they different? I don't know.
Yeah,
I expect more similarities than differences would be my hunch. But I think it's a critical conversation, because then you're making sure that you're working on things to mature them that aligns with executive expectation.
Yeah. And at the same time, like every measurement, what is comparable, it is a source of competition between processes and process owners, right? So immediately they are trying to measure themselves to the other one, trying to excel somehow in that competition, and sometimes it is getting to a race for the numbers, and they tend to forget sometimes what is behind the numbers. So what are the real important activities what they should do? Right?
Well, what I think is that we manage with lots of data points, whether it's completing projects on time, managing to your budget, having a KMMI score. So what I think at the end of the day is that if you add process maturity into the mix, it's just yet another reflection point into the culture of your organization. So that if you're in an organization that's highly competitive on these various things, whether it's process maturity, budgets, timing of projects, etc., the process maturity assessment itself will just be another data point that will reflect the competitiveness of the culture. Yes. But if you're working in an organization that's more consensus-driven, then when you see the variance in process scores, process maturity scores, as this is a culture that's thinking more about we than perhaps me, what you'll find is different behaviors, because maybe you'll find one process area will offer assistance to another process area to help lift them up. So I think what it comes down to is you'll just see another way that the culture of your organization is reflected through the work you do in process maturity, where you are on the spectrum of highly competitive to consensus or something somewhat in the middle.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it is time to give some opportunity to our other participants to talk, to ask questions, what we try to answer if we can, and also discuss your experiences. Do you measure your process maturity? Do you have any experience? Where are the issues with that? Is it really worth to measure maturity? What do you think? Anybody, just jump in.
So Ivan, this is Hardeep here. I just have a question regarding the solution that you have built for the maturity.
Yeah.
I remember way back in ITIL V2, they used to have a process maturity toolkit. You know, is it something? Is it on a similar line that you've taken that and adopted to ITIL V3, or is it bringing some other factors from other frameworks like Quabit and some of the other CMI frameworks?
Yeah, the latter one. Exactly. We took a couple of frameworks, tried to catch the elements that is true for any process, so not process specific. And it is built that way. Those are simply yes/no questions or statements, or if you wish, requirements, like process is described with a swim lane diagram, right? Or process has a training for every practitioner, and the training is repeated annually. Some requirements like that, and we had to do that because our process model includes 42 processes, not 26 like ITIL, because we are dealing with all the processes executed by IT, including SDLC processes and other processes as well. So that's a very general tool, and I'm ready to share with anybody more details if required. We didn't want to make a long presentation with our all Be Strong 92 questions in the questionnaire, but it is, there is no secret in that, and I think this is true for Kaiser Permanente. I'm not sure it is true generally, because you are focusing on your environment, on your process setup. What do you think about governance? That governance is very different from company to company, process governance. In some places you have process owners, other places also process managers, maybe process stewards and so on. So it should be adopted to your model as well.
And you know what I would add to that just is, don't be afraid to tailor things to make it successful.
Right.
So maybe it's not perfect and you make some compromises, but rather than not getting the initiative off the ground at all because you're running into roadblocks, sometimes you can do some tailoring and compromises for the bigger mission. So no matter what framework is out there, have a look what works for your organization, and that the folks who are using it feel that they were perhaps even part of creating the solution, and tailor it as much as you need to get it going.
Gentlemen, can I ask you a question at this point?
Yes. Anytime.
I'm interested in, with 42 processes, that is huge. When I think about a dashboard and how to represent that, not everybody is process savvy to the beginning. How did you tune and build your start? For those who are just beginning to approach process maturity, how do you recommend they start?
Yeah, so on the dashboard, what we did was, nobody can, as I said, we've got only a couple of seconds of executive attention and so on. So what we did was we aggregated information. So we looked at the aggregate maturity for the processes, and then we had, little arrows to show did process maturity stay constant this month or go up? And if it went up, which portfolios or groupings did it go up in? And you could drill down into more detail. So we found that to be a pretty effective way just to kind of show the lay of the land and where we are relative to last month. I don't know, Ivan, if you have any thoughts on that, on the dashboard?
Yeah, and this is not just a dashboard, I think, Don, what you have asked, but also how can you start your journey? I think the most important starting point, you should identify what do you expect from your processes. When can you say this process is good enough to use? Is it well documented? Is it followed? Is it governed? Is it measured? Is it improved time to time? Right? So what do you expect? Expectations are extremely important, and then you can try to apply those requirements to each of your processes. And you are right. Not everybody starts with a full process model that covers every standard process in your organization. It is equally good to start with your most important processes, where you have compliance requirements or strong business need to be perfect, like change, incident, problem, the usual suspects, and try to measure and compare them.
Good. What about others on the call? Do we have any questions? Because I'd also like to circle around and see how others have experienced, have everybody introduce themselves maybe, and how they've used any process maturity modeling. But first, let's make sure that we've answered any questions people have from your presentation. What about those on the call? Anyone have questions?
Yeah, I do. This is Rangesh here. You guys can hear me?
Hi, Rangesh. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the concern here is when we say process maturity and we make it very visible, I have seen a lot of resistance from the folks actually. Whereas having from the service management, if the person knows the process, knows ITIL, and the KPIs and everything, the way he drives it, with not much of an announcement, it has been successful. What is your thought on it, actually?
I think it is important what George mentioned, sponsorship. So you need the leaders to understand the importance of maturity first.
I understand that. Yeah, I agree.
And when they are on board, everybody is on board. So our own experience in Kaiser Permanente, we have a number of different big departments led by senior VPs. We call them BIOS, Business Information Office. And it is different in the different BIOS how the processes are followed, because it depends how the senior VP is pushing that forward. We have some champions, we have some lagging areas.
There's also a cultural issue here, which has been somewhat interesting in that, as I mentioned, I think earlier on, we work with people in the various processes like finance and so on, who are the experts. They do this day in, day out, and yet they have a hard time grasping, I've done all this work, but I'm only, less than a 1.0, right? So some of these low numbers have been a little bit of a challenge to get people to accept the lower KMMI scores. And, recognize that Nirvana might be a 3.0, where, as you all go through, of course, the educational system, if somebody said you're a 1.0, very few people celebrate. But in the world of AMMI, process maturity, I think you should make a major effort to celebrate every success at every level. So I think that's a point that's tied to your thing about how resistance and acceptance. If you achieve a 1.0, be sure to celebrate it, because it is a point worthy of a celebration. And you have to get people to stop thinking about these low numbers as negatives.
I think that this is Rangesh's statement plus yours, George, really puts in mind how I feel about this too. Yes, I totally agree that sponsorship and executive support is really necessary. And how we can be good advocates and communicators of change. And I started our process maturity model for just our change process when I came to Palo Alto Networks. Our process was a 1. We moved it to a 2 within 6 months. But we had to be constantly marketing why we're doing this, what we're doing this, and what we will do that moves the dial. We had to make sure people understood that documenting change and managing it consistently in a similar fashion, and stop sending email and start planning process and start working together. These are things that mature our business. So we had everybody talking about what does it mean to move the dial. And if you're looking at these common levels of improvement, everybody's better at articulating what's success and what needs to improve to get to success, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've had a couple of funny experiences where some people said, I can't possibly be a 1.0 before they even looked at the assessment. I must be a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're just going to check all those boxes. But it's interesting, there is something there that you need to get those conversations going, celebrate your successes, and try and move the culture of the organization.
Very good. Rangesh, did that answer some of your questions? Did that spark anything new for you?
No, I think that answered actually. The executive, I agree with them. Yes, definitely.
And what about others? Are there any other questions that have come up for you as we've gone through this presentation and discussion?
So, Don, I have a follow-up question onto your process maturity in the change management. So when you do move from 1.0 to 2.0, were you able to quantify business improvement by doing that process maturity?
Yes. The things that we looked at as indicators, and this is, I really liked what Ivan and George were talking about as they went through the model, because they were talking about, what do we need to measure to know we're being effective? At Palo Alto Networks, what we looked at is how do we know people are adopting, where are they adopting and where are they not? We actually originally just created who's creating change and what incidents are we seeing. So by comparing the two, the relationship between incidents and incidents induced by change, we could actually start to move the dial on better planning around change management, measuring who's adopting it. And I would have a marketing campaign with each group that was doing very well to be a model for success. And those that were not doing so well, I would work with them one-on-one to help them identify how we could improve. This is our second year in change management, and adoption and execution. We're doing 200% of the volume of change that we did when I came in at this time last year. And our customer quality, the incident ratio, has actually gone down. Even though we're doing more change, we're having less incident, and that is a measure of success as it relates to change.
Sure.
Yeah, change management is a great example how hard to measure adoption, because you can measure change-induced incidents, of course, and change-induced incidents, it is usually the result not following the process,
right,
not at all, or not following well. But but it is just the tip of the iceberg. You will never know how many actual changes were done without causing any incidents, because they will remain unknown, right?
So, if they didn't log them, you can't measure them, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So how can even estimate, for example, how many changes should be there? Like comparing similar projects. One submitted 250 changes, the other one 2. What is behind that, right? So there are interesting ways to measure adoption, and it is changing from process to process, but they are common in that everybody should measure adoption, not just believe, okay, we have communicated, it is done. Yeah, people are doing it. No, it's not enough, right?
In early change, in early adoption, I think the main thing that we want to articulate is not so much quality change, but log the change, log it, do this, do that. You know, plan ahead, log it, do this. If it's an emergency, do it this way. If it's a normal, do it this way. Then you would add on layers of predictability, manageability, and quality.
Yeah. Any other question? Anybody else? Or you want to speak up? Yeah, this is not good what you are talking about, or something like that.
Has there been any? Have we struck any questions for others, or comments? What I'd like to do is, at this point, George and Ivan, if you guys, I would like us to roundtable and have everybody introduce themselves and speak about your experience with maturity, process maturity, capability improvements, or any questions that you might have for Ivan and George. Does that seem like a reasonable approach for our next steps?
Yep. Please.
Okay. I'm going to start at the top of the agenda and start tagging people. And because at the top of the agenda is a guy who's been entirely too quiet for tonight, Louie.
How did I get that at the top of that list?
You are my guy. Introduce yourself, where you're from, and talk to us about your experience with process maturity or any questions you have.
Will do. Thanks, Don. My name is Louie Garcia. I work with Kaiser Permanente as well, and I'm a process consultant. They're specifically working on processes like application lifecycle management and problem management, etc. So because I already work with Ivan and George, I'm already a part of this exercise. I think the value add, if I can be so bold, for this team, this collective trust that's here in the Bay Area, is when you are applying some form of maturity measures, is that it's specific to the processes that you have in play. The big challenge I've observed is that so oftentimes we're well intentioned with our models, our methods, ITIL, et cetera. We have these standards, and it's great, but that's not often reflective of what's really going on. And so the value add, I just want to encourage you folks that are on the, for the team that's here for the Bay Area, as you're looking and considering this notion of maturity metrics, just want to encourage you in that specific area so that way you don't get too frustrated in trying to compare best practices against what's currently in play. Okay.
Good stuff. Thank you, Louie. And yeah, I totally agree. It's really important that what I liked about what you guys had to share is how you broke it down in a way that everybody could unify and kind of start to speak a common language and not allow the jargon to get in the way of progress. So I think that's all very interesting. Next, I would like to go to Naveen. Naveen, you've also been very quiet. Please share with us. Introduce yourself and any comments or questions you might have on the topic.
All right, thank you, Don. So I'm Naveen. I have neither worked in Kaiser Permanente nor in Palo Alto Networks. I'm just a regional manager for a technology service provider and also the person managing IT service management advisory. One thing that I noted during the conversation is Ivan mentioning about process are not common or standard across company. I completely agree with him on that one. Things that work in one company or one organization setup need not necessarily work in another organization. So the way I look at process is at a very basic level. It shouldn't be burdening people. At the same time, the output should be comforting enough for every team to work productively.
Good.
And the way to judge that is using the KPIs and metrics that are being determined, both from a business outcome standpoint and also quantification aspect standpoint. That's the way I approach process and metrics, irrespective of whether it's change management incident or whether it is information technology related or any other service center related.
Nice. Excellent. Rangesh, introduce yourself, where you're from, and anything else you'd like to add about your experience.
Sure. Yes, guys. I think like I was there. I think like around month of November in Palo Alto Networks. You guys had a itSMF meetup, right? That time, like I was there actually. So that's when I came to know about it. Like the itSMF was active again. Anyway, coming to me, I'm right now working for SAP. I'm working as a delivery manager, a delivery project executive. So my specialty and expertise comes with cloud migrations and service improvement plan and gap analysis in the service management area. Past experience, I have roughly around 17 years of experience, been with IBM and HP for a very long time, like around 6 years, and HP for 4 years. Earlier to that, I was with Computer Associates. That's it from my side. Yeah.
Great.
So you've done a lot with process. You've had to have with those companies.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. Do we have two Naveens on the call? Did the other Naveen join? Maybe not.
No, in the same Naveen.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're so important you show up twice. That's pretty talented of you.
That's one way to look at it, yeah.
Let me see. I think I've got one more person. Mr. Khan, would you care to introduce or ask any questions you have about process improvement? If not, introduce yourself.
Hello, guys. My name is Russell. Actually, I have experience as a business analyst. I worked in a couple of projects, but I was more interested in service management, especially service now. The reason of my interest in service now basically came from Dawn. And I was watching her that she was spending so much time of her day, her night in this. So I was very curious what she is actually trying to achieve or doing, how she's super busy and so much time. So I tried to understand and ask her some questions, and she was showing me what service management and how service now works. And I felt very impressed, especially with the problem management and incident management, knowledge management. And I was lucky to participate in a couple of meetups, especially on the school. So I felt really very, very interesting as well as very important, because problem everywhere, I mean, wherever the company is, the problem is there. And this is a great way to understand how we deliver the service to the customers, as well as what are the things that you learn, achieve the goal of not only the company perspective, but also the customer perspective too.
Right.
So I'm working and trying to educate myself, and I simply got my instance on service now. I'm just kind of playing, just educate myself as much as possible. And with all the great conversation from all those experienced great people, I'm very much optimistic and hoping to make myself much better position in coming future. But thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Russell. I really like what's happening in itSMF, because this really is where we come with a few of our best ideas and we put them together and magic pops out the other side. Some of the challenges that we might be having in our workforce, I think it was Rangesh that had talked about the challenges of it, one size doesn't fit all. How can we adapt, adjust, and adopt? Process maturity is really interesting. I've been following SEI, CMMI, Capability Maturity Model, for everything that I could find when we first started implementing ITIL, well before Palo Alto Networks at Sun Microsystems some years ago. And what started as really an application development solution became a really nice alignment utility for the way we do business. And Ivan, that's what I like about how you guys put this together, is the generic nature doesn't say, for this process, you must be doing this, this, and this. What you're saying is, here's the framework that we're wanting to improve upon. Here are the common levels that we would see at this. How can we come together and assess and agree to where we are and build a bridge to where we need to go?
Yeah, and I think it is really important as we are going forward with this small webinars or talks. We know each other better. We know who is working on which field, and anytime, at least from my side, anytime somebody wants to know something more details, help to solve a problem, I'm really happy to help, and I think others as well. So we can build a kind of expert network where you have a problem. Probably the first thing, Google it, and then look around in between your friends. But then you stop and you don't know who to ask, and this network can help in those cases, I think. So you remember, yeah, Dawn is there at Palo Alto Networks with the change management knowledge. I can ask her how to get over this problem. So that can be really helpful.
I'm really excited about this too. I'm starting some new processes now that are basically level 1 process. So, George, I was laughing as you were talking about that we should never begin. If we begin at 1, we need to have about a 12-month plan to be able to quickly get to a baseline. And I think, oh dear God, how can we create more hours in the day, or a really smarter model to get there fast? How can we accelerate?
Yeah, and maybe the best solution to share. So I'm really offering, if you want, we can sit down one-on-one and talk about the processes you are struggling with. We have a lot of experience in many processes, not in everything, but I'm saying proudly that last year we have documented all the 42 processes. We have standard documentation for all of them, going down to the swim lane level. We have documented the measurements. We have all the narratives around the process. We have training for the most. So that's a big step forward. But this is something we are happy to leverage to others and require.
Very good. Any other thoughts or questions or comments that this has struck for others? Has it inspired anything that we have left unasked? Wow. George and Ivan, you guys must rock the whole the whole maturity model. This is some good stuff.
Hopefully people are not shocked into silence when you realize the journey.
Well, I really applaud your journey. I actually was at Kaiser when they were really struggling to create that process culture. And I applaud how far you've been able to take it and how you've been able to get that level of success. I know that is A, not easy, and B, demanding given the importance and demands that you have in your day job to be able to do this and make it shine as well. That's challenging, and it's a good one.
Thanks.
Okay.
Great. Well, let's roundtable. Was this a useful session for you guys tonight? And where would you like to see us take this discussion next? Because we're going to start doing the Thursday after lunch calls next week. We just wanted to get past this meeting today to kind of set the stage for what we would do next week. What are you guys working on now that you might like to apply maturity model to, or have some more discussions in our Thursday discussions that we carry forward? Anything that you're working on that you'd like to talk through at a maturity level or beyond?
Yeah, we are working on everything, I think, at the same time.
How are you applying it today, Ivan? What are you guys working on today?
How do you mean where? Which areas?
Yeah, what are you working on today in maturity?
Yeah. In maturity, we kind of finished our development work already a time ago, and we are trying to motivate everybody to make their first assessment with the new tool, because most of the processes were assessed only with the old tool, which is comparable but not 100%. And we are trying to put together the data for the CIO dashboard. Sometimes it's challenging. That's the main focus. However, some of the champion process sponsors already working on comparing the results of the individual areas and setting expectations. This is really a great thing, and we see how process maturity assessments are helping the process improvement work. So that's pretty good to see. But also we are working on a lot of other big programs. So maturity is just one small piece, and now we are focusing on some processes. And one of the targets when we touch a process, to push it up to the level 3, or at least targeting level 3, which means a standardized, well-documented, well-measured, well-governed process. And that's a big challenge in many of the processes. And it is interesting how we apply different approaches depending on the acceptance level of the people, how they are reacting. With some processes, we are going department to department, adding one time each, like with release management. That's really a big challenge. How can we standardize release management across the many towers what we are maintaining? And with some others, we are trying to improve adoption, like with change management typically, or incident management, where everybody is following already the same process in a way, right? So we want to improve that way. That's a different kind of challenge, different kind of approach. Change management is a good example. For example, that it has reached level 3 about 2 years ago, and now with the new assessment, we have found they are under 2 now. They slipped back because they didn't maintain the process. They didn't follow the changes, didn't look into the adoption numbers. So again, they have restarted the journey and trying to get there again. So even with our best processes, we can never sit back and be happy. That's important learning.
So George, what are you doing with maturity now? What are you working on?
Yeah, so what I'm doing with the process maturity, because it's January and we're setting our goals and so on. So it's a multi-year effort. So some of the processes that I'm working on, I'm particularly looking at service catalog management, and I think they want to get to a maturity. I want to try and see if they can get to a 3.0. That would be ideal. So I'm trying to work on some processes to raise up their maturity, continuing the journey that we started last year. So I try to let people know this isn't just an annual effort that ends December 31st, that this is a multi-year effort. And indeed, with IT asset management, we just ended after about, what was it, 5 years, Ivan? Something like that?
Yeah.
So the short answer is I'm trying to continue the journey and keep the momentum going. And I think that's one of the challenges we sort of alluded to, that when you're on these multi-year journeys, you've got to find ways to keep the excitement and momentum going. And that's what I'm trying to do.
And it seems as you navigate the summit and you start to think you're getting this higher level of maturity, if you really are measuring the right stuff, you actually see that there's opportunities to improve that you didn't have before. Like after we got everybody logging change and logging it in the same way and identifying consistently what was a moderate and above risk that multiple teams needed to review at CAB. After we got all that done, we still realized we were planning everything on the fly, and that if the industry standard showed your expedited change at around 2 to 5%, ours was between 50 and 63%.
Yeah.
There still was a need to work on the front end. So what you're calling release management right now, change management planning is going to set the stage for release management for us.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a very good point, because very often the solution for a problem in a process lays in another process, right? Mm-hmm. If release is not functioning well, it is almost impossible to keep control on change. And also, if incident management is not right, how can you measure back your change induced incidents? You won't know what is really change induced, right? Yeah, or everything is that or nothing, right? So that's also a big learning, and maturity helps in that, but not only maturity, to keep a conversation across process owners, and not just focusing on one process, but focusing on the related processes as well, and working together to improve the triggers between the processes and the triggering information to provide the information expected by the other process.
Has anyone on the call used a maturity model approach or created an accelerator to get everybody aligned on something more complex? Like change in incident, ticket handling is pretty easy. Has anybody done anything on config or service configuration?
John, I have done some assessments earlier, a couple of years back, primarily in the space of configuration management and service and asset management. So yeah, I've used, and that's the reason I was asking, what are the kind of maturity models have you used? So I have used a model taken from ITIL V2, transformed into V3, and brought in those additional aspects of it. I did, but I've never used it within my own company, but have used with a couple of companies like Cisco.
Yeah.
Helping them evaluate that, and a couple of other companies, British Telecom in UK. So I work with them to evaluate ITIL V3 processes using the maturity toolkit. So my experience has been is that since you're not doing it internally, you're doing it externally, because I'm an external person, doing it for them. You don't have that level of engagement. So you give them the solution, but then since there's no internal buy-in from that, it doesn't work out that well. Right. But yeah, but I have used this in Adobe also from a CMDB perspective, and we were able to identify a couple of improvement areas. I think from a service and asset management perspective, a key aspect over there is and I think it's true for other processes also, is the sponsorship from the senior management, senior leadership, because the data is living in all processes. Unless you have that senior level buy-in for that kind of assessment and improvement opportunities, you're not going to improve it. Okay. And the other aspect I like what George mentioned is that when you're doing the process improvement, you need to go back and compromise on a few things just to get to achieve the larger goal around that. So, and I think that's the technique I have also used in Adobe, where people don't trust the data, so you kind of work with them, and it's more of a interpersonal skills and the maturity toolkit there. So that has been my experience.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. The config change relationship to create the real closed loop change management, right? So we are in a middle of our journey in configuration management. That means we have already some service models in config, but not all of them. And it is really hard to keep a full adoption of configuration management, config relationship, when there is no reward in that, only for selected services, right?
Right.
So that's a challenge, and it needs a very deep understanding. Why are we doing this, and why it's important.
Yeah, the level set seems to be the challenge that I encounter. Is it seems when you try to get an approach, just the start to service configuration management, which is what's the business service mapping to the app layer. Just start at these two levels.
Right.
Depending on who you're talking to, just for this and this. When you talk business services, you're talking to an app person, they're going to answer you in apps. If you're talking to an infrastructure person, they're going to talk to you in IP addresses, servers, or server types.
Right, exactly.
But kind of trying to put it together in a way that we say, okay, to start out with, we're really only talking about what's running where and who owns it at the highest level, and then evolving it from there. I think that becomes the challenge. Getting it owned consistently, but accounting for the differences where it needs to exist.
I think the key challenge over there is not doing it manually. Figure out a way, mechanics to do it in a systematic manner.
Right.
If you're doing it manually, the relationship will be out of sync within a month.
Right.
And with the cloud and all those kind of things, where you have a elasticity, horizontal elasticity, you will never be able to attain that level of accuracy. And if it is not accurate, you run an impact assessment on that model and it is wrong for some reason, and so people start losing the interest on the data. And if they lose the interest once, they will never come back again. So I think the key thing there is that figure out an automated process of mapping. You have to loop in release management if you want to do that modeling around that. If release management is not involved in that mapping exercise, your model will go out of sync very fast. And I have faced that kind of challenges in many organizations.
Excellent.
Yeah, totally.
So Naveen, and we haven't heard from Naveen or Louie. How are you guys? What are you guys working on now? And are you doing anything with, process maturity and kicking things up the next notch?
Oops.
Yeah, currently I'm working on setting up the global inventory management process for a service provider. So that involves taking care of global end user device shipping and management, along with making sure that replacements are sent at the right time. There are more than 15,000 assets that are deployed in the field, not in a network. So these are all managed by cloud service appliances. That is the part that is challenging, and it has already been deployed. So now we have to get all those things accounted for, make sure that every configuration change that goes in there is being remotely monitored by a cloud service appliance, which manages the system, pushes out patches, all that good stuff. On the other side, we have to also look at ways to make sure that software licenses or utilization is being monitored and they're being harvested at the right time whenever the devices come back or when replacements are being sent out. These are like each and every device, end user device is valued at $2,000.
Wow.
So that's what I'm working on right now.
You really know how to have all the fun, don't you? So basically you're trying to get your arms around a beast. That's
pretty much the type of things they call me for.
That's awesome. What about others? Anybody else care to share what they're working on now? I think we might have lost a few.
Yeah.
Okay. Gentlemen, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Hardeep and Ivan. Do you have any closing thoughts before we start to wrap up?
No, I think I would just want to, we'll reach out to the members to see if, they'll be interested in doing a member introduction video. And I think that's what we want to kick off. If you guys have any topic that you want to continue talking about, we want to launch that Thursday call, please join that call. This is basically a community forum. So I think your participation is the most important thing in the forum. So
Great.
Participate there, and let's keep this moving and exciting for all of us.
Yeah, I really liked. It's January now. It's time for a fresh year and some new IT service management forum faces. So definitely reach out to Hardeep or Ivan if you have. If we can interview you, it'll just be a casual interview, and we could talk about whichever processes you wish. I think that's great, Hardeep. What about you, Ivan? Any closing thoughts?
No, I think this is really good, and we should continue. And we may use the list we put together and Hardeep started with on this conversation to pick the topics most interested by the most of the people, and let's see how it evolves. Right.
Okay. Gentlemen, Ivan and George, thank you so much for your input and fantastic sharing with us tonight. For our next meetings, my ask of members, if you have ideas of local meetings where we could host like 30 or more members, we are looking to do one local meeting a quarter. So right now we're targeting March timeframe for a local meeting. If you have suggestions for where we can meet that's not Palo Alto Networks, I would love to have recommendations and suggestions.
Right.
As much as we love having you guys come, there is so much more to this bay than our little spot in Santa Clara. We'd like to come visit you all too. So maybe the next meeting we can have is at Kaiser Permanente, or we can check with other members. So if you have suggestions, please.
Definitely.
And if you have ideas for meeting topics that you'd like to either hear covered or share be in touch with me, and I would love to schedule our next meetings. I want to thank you guys all for attending. Thank you, Ivan and George, for your great presentation tonight. And Hardeep, thank you for talking us through the meeting progress as well. We've got a good start to the new year, and we're looking forward to more networking.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
for organizing this. Thanks.
Always happy to help you guys.
Bye.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.